Welcome to Instruction Discussion, our weekly look at the latest topics and trends in education affecting schools here on Long Island and schools around the world. Whether you're a teacher, parent, or student, listen for tips and strategies to help you navigate the educational landscape. There's a bell. It's time to start today's Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boston Hill, and welcome to Instruction Discussion, where each week we will examine a recent trend or development in education and its impact on Long Island. Ask just about anyone about the best or most effective way to change your family's economic outlook, and they will tell you that higher education is the answer. Year after year, students try to navigate their way to college admission, crafting portfolios full of activities, great grades, and anything else they feel will give them a leg up on the competition. However, just when they seem to have solved the college admission puzzle, another obstacle has been thrown at them: the FAFSA formula. The FAFSA, or Free Application for Federal Student Aid, is the only way for families to get access to federal education dollars in order to pay to attend the school they worked so hard to get into. Anyone who has ever filled out a FAFSA will also tell you that their aid amount hinges on the calculation of the EFC, or expected family contribution, a number which very few, if any, people actually agree with. Well, now there is a new formula, one that has seen an even lower award amount given to families, especially the middle class. To help us understand the new FAFSA formula and its implications, today we welcome education expert Maria Alejandra Canales, Managing Director of Program Implementation at OneGoal, an organization that addresses the opportunity gap by supporting high school students in realizing their college or post-secondary dreams. Ms. Canales, welcome to Instruction Discussion on 90.3 WHPC.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm happy to be here.
Well, actually, I'm really glad that you were able to come and carve out some time in your busy schedule to be with us, because we know that paying for school, for one thing, getting into a college or higher education is one thing, but then we have to figure, okay, now how are we going to pay for it? And so for a lot of families, that day they get that acceptance letter is probably the happiest day of their lives to date. But then immediately they're like, okay, reality sets in, because now they see the price tag that comes along with that acceptance. They're like, right. How am I going to pay for it? What next? And we know that the way to do that is by filling out that FAFSA. So let's dive into it a little bit, and just what is different with the current FAFSA than what we've been used to filling out over the last however many years.
Yeah, there were a lot of changes that happened over this past year. Some that are, minor, the way they're asking particular questions, that sort of thing. But some that have larger implications. For example, there's a new way that FAFSA is calculating like the sibling discount, right? In the past, if you were a family and you had multiple students or multiple siblings at attending college, you would get a discount for each of those, right? The contribution you expected to contribute was like for your family, not per student. That's changed, all right? And so we're seeing that some of the changes are having an impact for all families really that are applying and are important for us to keep track of and to start noticing, but shouldn't be like held against applying. We should still apply. It's still super important to get through those and apply. Some of the changes have been positive. There's some changes around allowing students and families that have either mixed status or undocumented parents being able to access the form a little bit easier. And so I think there's a mixed bag on like the impact of some of the changes that they're having, but impacting our families nonetheless.
I think that's a really important distinction to talk about there, and that is about those who have undocumented status, because I know that that's usually a very stressful time for students and their families, because they figure, okay, I got accepted to this school, but now I'm afraid to fill out any federal documents because I don't want my parents to get found out and get deported, or anything anything else that may come along with it, or I don't know what I'm eligible for because most of my family members are undocumented. I might even be undocumented, and because I'm here educationally, I'm allowed to be in the high school for that. So having that change, can you explain a little bit more what that change is, or how it does positively impact those students?
Yeah. So, we find in our work with our students at OneGoal that oftentimes what you named is right. Our students are just scared. Sometimes our students find out about their own status through going through the FAFSA application, right? And so it's a very sensitive time. Really important to keep in mind human centeredness and everything that they're experiencing. But once we sort of get over that hurdle and we identify that the student is in fact eligible, so you do have to be a citizen, so a student of mixed status, so they might be a citizen and eligible for the FAFSA, but their parents might not be. We still support them in applying for the FAFSA. The first hurdle is ensuring that your parents are able and okay with sharing their financial information. That is the first thing. Once we get there, I think there's a matter of them documenting everything and entering it into FAFSA. And in the past, they've required a social security number. And if you didn't have a social security number, you would put all zeros, and it was just an ordeal. And so that process has been simplified a bit for those families, making it a little bit easier to submit the information that is needed. They still need to fill it all out, but the initial steps have been made a little bit easier to do that. Now, students that are not eligible because they either knew or at this point find out that they are undocumented, we still at OneGoal support them in identifying scholarships, grants, or other ways, depending on where you're located. Different states have different programs as well that support undocumented students in achieving their post-secondary goals and aspirations, whether that be higher education of some sort or a technical certification or something like that too.
Now, I want to go back a little bit to a part of your answer you said at the very beginning, and that's regarding the multiple siblings who are in school at the same time. Because I know when I was applying for the FAFSA and how I told some of my other students who were coming up is that it was a good thing to have more. The more students you had in school, the better it was for the younger ones, because it meant there would be more money available for you. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So explain to us what happened.
Yeah, there used to be what was called a sibling discount, right? And so there was a set amount of family contribution that you were expected. And then every time a student was in, that expected contribution was decreasing each time. So then that meant you were more eligible for money. Now there's a 10,000 expected contribution that applies to each student. And so it doesn't matter if you have multiple students, your family is still expected to contribute that for each individual child. So imagine a family of 3 or 4 that happen to fall within a 4 period, 4 period or 6, because, a lot of students take a little bit longer to complete. Now you're looking at $30,000-$40,000 contribution that's expected. That's not realistic, I think, for most of us nowadays.
Especially when you're talking about middle class families. I mean, that $30,000-$40,000, that's a big chunk.
Yes. And even more so for our lower income families too that we work with. I mean, one is a lot to contribute for, imagine multiple. And so that is a reality now that we are having to think through, okay, what does this look like? What are additional funding sources that you might look for? FAFSA is still the number one way. I can't iterate that enough. There's still time. Submit the application if you're listening, you haven't, done so. And it's not just when you're starting, right, your post-secondary career. This is an ongoing process. Finding funding to sustain you throughout your post-secondary career is every year. You have to resubmit a FAFSA. You have to continue to look for more scholarships, grants, all that sort of thing. It doesn't go away. It's not 1 year and done. It's how do you continue to do that? And we find that financial challenges are the number one reason why the students that we support at OneGoal drop out. They stop out. And oftentimes we find that those financial challenges are relatively small. They couldn't keep up with an unexpected expense. Their car broke down and they couldn't, repair it. And now they're like stuck in this, or, something happened at home or whatever it might be. Oftentimes that gap that they find themselves struggling with isn't even tuition at times. It's these other life circumstances that happen. So it is really important to think through not just, FAFSA, but other sources of funding to sustain you throughout your post-secondary career.
You've mentioned the company a couple of times here, so let's get right into it. What is OneGoal, and I guess what is the purpose? What is the mission of OneGoal?
Yeah, so OneGoal's mission is to transform the one-on-one advising landscape of post-secondary education. So we work directly with schools, school leaders, districts, and we have a number of programs in place to support all students really accessing advising to support them in attaining their post-secondary career goals and aspirations. Particularly, our OneGoal program is a 3-year program. It starts off as a credit-bearing course in the 11th grade, and it follows students through their 12th grade and into their first year of their post-secondary career. We're across the country, so we have 6 different regions, including New York. So really excited to be repping New York. And we really work to support them throughout the entire process. So in their first year, they're learning about what's important to me, what are my strengths, who am I? We explore identity. What do we want to do? What impact do we want to have in the community? To land on my best fit list. What are the, 7 schools that really meet my needs, what I need, not just for professionally, but financially. We look at financial fit from the beginning. That school needs to be attainable for you and your family. So we start from the beginning thinking through, what can your family afford? What's affordable to you? And that question is very personal. It changes, every person has a different answer to that. So we support students through that, eventually, helping them through applying to FAFSA their senior year, applying to post-secondary institutions, and then landing on a decision and enrolling. And then in that 3rd year, everything's a little bit more remote because students are sort of everywhere, right? We don't see them in high school every day anymore. But we have staff members along with the teachers that taught that course in their high school, connecting with them. We connect with them via text when they come back for the holidays. They usually have meetups, that sort of thing. But they engage in advising with our program, even when they're in college or their, post-progressive pathway, to make sure that we're asking them the same types of questions. Hey, have you applied to financial aid already? Like, where are you understanding? How are your grades looking? Have you connected with a professor yet? Have you gone to office hours, right? Like, really building those skills of self-advocacy, growth mindset, purpose, and relevance throughout our program.
You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is Maria Alejandra Canales, Managing Director of Program Design at OneGoal. Now, you mentioned at the beginning of the answer that it's credit bearing. So the program is credit bearing. Exactly how? How do they earn credit? So I mean, they're actually earning college credit while they're through the program, or what do you mean by credit bearing?
Yeah. They're earning high school credit. So because we start in high school, it's a credit bearing course in terms of it counts usually for some elective. It varies a little bit by state and district, right? Every state and district has their own approval process, but we make sure that it is credit bearing for a couple of reasons, right? There are a lot of different approaches to supporting students, but at OneGoal, we really believe firmly in having something built in during the school day, right? That is when students, they're there. If it's credit bearing, that means there's like a grade involved, like folks are just more motivated. They're in front of us. They're a captive audience for us to support them in any way we can. And so it feels really important to make sure that we continue to be credit bearing. And we have some other programs, that may not be credit bearing. But this one is, and it has proven to have like great results in terms of our enrollment rates and our persistence rates. And for our students. So we're really excited to continue to work with them every day in their classrooms.
So is there a cost to the families to get involved or the schools to get involved? And how closely, I assume that you work closely with the guidance offices of those high schools. So, and how do you, I guess, manage that part of it and supporting the guidance counselors when it comes to the college application process? Yeah,
that's a great question. So no cost. It is free for students and family. It's an elective that they can sign up for in their high school, courses. And in the best case scenario, what we strive for is to really integrate ourselves into that school community, right? Guidance counselors, advisors that already exist. They have all sorts of different titles nowadays, but folks in a school building that are supporting students in this path hold a ton of information and are great advocates for students already. And so what we hope to do is we're hoping to expand the capacity of that school building, right? One of the things that research shows is that on average, students only get 38 minutes of advising throughout their high school career. 38 minutes to make.
I'm sorry. Wait. 38 minutes throughout the entire 4 years that they're in high school, they get 38 minutes of advising. Not 38 minutes per day or per week, but for the 4 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Clearly that's not it. I mean, we take more than 38 minutes for other decisions in our lives that are not going to impact.
It takes more than 38 minutes to get to school every day.
Right. And so OneGoal is just trying to increase that, right? Like through our program, we include every year, there's 4 advising sessions, about 15 minutes. We're like quadrupling the amount of time that the average student will get in advising through our program. That feels really important to us. Because it's in those conversations that, one, you start to see that there is a caring adult who's invested in you, that can support you and answer your questions and help guide you. That's the other secret sauce, right? The teachers that are in our OneGoal classrooms, man, they're the ones that are, putting it out there and doing the hard work every day and with our students. And those relationships really matter, right? It's about building trust. Going back to what we talked about our undocumented students, right? It's getting students to trust you, to have those difficult conversations and help them make a really big decision of their lives. And our role really is to put them in the driver's seats. We really try to empower our students and have them practice self-advocacy, really explore who they want to be, what matters to them. And we're just there to guide them and provide some context and frameworks to help them make that decision, right? And that's really our role as a program, to ensure that our students are getting that from their teachers, from our staff, and that they feel like they're part of a bigger community that's there to support them.
So when it comes to, I guess, finding those sources of aid, whether it's through the FAFSA or otherwise, when can that process actually begin? Do students have to wait until their senior year to begin that process? And is there a finite window of opportunity for them to actually apply, not only to receive the scholarship money, but then to apply it to their college expenses?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most of the funding does require you to wait till your senior year, because that's usually scholarships, FAFSA, all that happens in that year. However, there's plenty of scholarships and opportunities that are available, particularly for the 11th grade year. That's when we start to see a little bit more opportunity for students. We encourage our students to start looking at scholarships that semester before their senior year and through summer, right? So that they're starting to gear up and starting to put in some scholarship applications. We partner with Dell. So there's lots of different opportunities in terms of scholarships that start to open up before your senior year, but tend to sort of peak senior year. Each scholarship will have their own requirements of how and when you can use the funds, but typically they're applied to the next immediate year. Right. And so if you're applying for something in your senior year, you usually need to use it your freshman year. And so I encourage students to be on the lookout for what those requirements are. For FAFSA, you'll have to reapply every year. And so every year, the award that you get will be based for that year. And it's also important to note that part of why FAFSA is really important is that many institutions, post-secondary institutions, that's all they're getting. So they're actually getting the FAFSA. And so any monies that they have, any funding that institutions are offering, many institutions do have scholarships, grants, things that they particularly offer that are separate from federal funds, they're also leveraging FAFSA. So if you want to access those funds, you also need to, submit your FAFSA. And so FAFSA becomes a real key ingredient in the funding aspect for post-secondary institutions. And another thing that we've started to do at OneGoal, and it's been quite successful. In fact, it's like our number one strategy to support our students in persisting. We have an enrollment grant. So students can apply as long as they're enrolled in a, higher ed or a pro path, they can apply for an enrollment grant up to $750. We have a couple of different, windows throughout the year. And they can apply at multiple windows, but we cap it at $750. And the idea is to fund those gaps, right? So oftentimes you'll get an award letter. It'll cover just about everything, but not quite. And so students need that extra support. And so that's where our enrollment grant steps in. Or if something happened, if there's an unexpected expense, a family need, something that is unplanned for, students can apply and get the grant. And we've learned a lot over the last few years. I think at first we had it once a year, and we learned actually life happens throughout the year. So now we have multiple windows, right? And students are able to access the funds throughout the year, as opposed to just once a year, that sort of thing. So really, really excited to be able to offer that to students and encourage students to think through what community resources exist, because there are other organizations that also have grants or scholarships. Starting local is really a key strategy for students when they're looking at funding for their schooling.
Now, when it comes to completing the FAFSA, I know we always hear that it has to be done. I think at one point it was you had to have it done it opened up in October. Then they moved it back to January. They keep moving those dates around. When it comes to completing the FAFSA, we know that a lot of colleges, a lot of institutions of higher learning have rolling admissions. So when it comes to applying for financial aid, does that kind of work on a similar type of program where you can actually apply and fill it out on a rolling basis as well?
It's like a yes and. So there's a huge window to apply. So you can, I think they finally did open it at some point in January fully and without the bugs, although bugs continued. And now we have a deadline coming up here in the next couple of weeks, right, to apply. And so there is a window, but you are free to apply throughout any of the time. However, it is one big pot of funding. And the later you wait in that window, the less there is in that pot, because they are also continuously awarding, right? And so when you think about that, I would encourage everyone, set a timer, use your phone, whatever technology you might, be into, to set a reminder. And when it opens, if you can, apply. That's going to give you the best, the best options in terms of what you could be awarded. And then the other thing to keep note of is that once you get your award letter, every higher ed institution is required to have an appeals process. So you get your award letter, maybe you had to wait for whatever reason, or you get it and it just isn't covering what you need. We encourage our students to use those self-advocacy skills that we teach them throughout the program, right? And appeal, because institutions are only looking at the form that you filled out. Oftentimes hearing from a student directly through the appeals process, or even sometimes through just an email, right? Just putting a human connection, a physical person will respond. And so getting that point of connection can oftentimes lead to higher awards, or additional leads on how else to fund things. And so it never hurts to file an appeal if you find that your award letter isn't covering all your expenses.
I was going to ask about that. I'm glad you brought that up, because like I said, when I was applying for myself, I saw the EFC number. I was like, that's ridiculous. That EFC is way too high. You need to bring that down. You need to chop off a couple of zeros before you bring this number to me. And I'm sure that a lot of families, even now with the new formula, are probably feeling the same thing, that they look at their award letters something's not right here. Did you really look at my income statements and so forth? Yeah. So knowing that there is an appeals process that the students and families can utilize, I think that's that may take a load off of their minds as far as and relieve some of that stress.
Yeah, I agree. We actually just heard back from a student earlier this week, where we continue to share this with students. And a student wrote back, they had a $12,000 gap in coverage. They sent an email to, their financial aid office and just pleaded their case and just sort of said like, hey, I can't do that. Like $12,000 is a lot. I can't do that. They weren't able to cover it all, but they took off $8,000.
Oh, wow.
Dollars. And so now $4,000, a lot more manageable, right? You can maybe find a job or like increase that, like whatever that person's situation might be, but it feels a lot more manageable and a lot less likely for someone to, choose or have to make a difficult choice of dropping out or stopping or taking a break, because they can't afford it. And so, really important for students to leverage and families to leverage that appeal process. And you'll need to, provide some evidence of what is, if there's a extenuating circumstance, they might ask for your income tax rate. Like there's going to be a process, but take advantage of it, because it exists for a reason. And there are pockets of funding specifically assigned to take care of appeals that come in. Oh, right. Wow. And so if people aren't appealing, there's funds that just stay there. And so take advantage of that appeal process.
So I know we mentioned, and we have a few minutes here, but I know we mentioned that the FAFSA has to be applied every year, filled out every year. And the same thing, I guess we need to also mention that the same thing applies to scholarships, because some scholarships are renewable, but there are others that aren't. They're one time only. So what do you say to those students who may receive one of those one time awards that are good just for freshman year, but now they still have 3, 4, 5 years to go? So what do they do in that situation?
Yeah, I think that they follow a similar process. So the same way you secured those first round of scholarships, you probably will need to do that again, right? Get back on those scholarship websites, apply to additional scholarships. Oftentimes, those one-time scholarships could be great leads into either different or additional scholarships, or sometimes that's where you network, right? And they might have a different program you qualify. So I think the name of the game really is continuing to do the same things and doing some networking and making sure you're staying connected. Once you're on campus too, I always encourage all of our students to go and make a direct connection with someone in the financial aid office, because they'll also be able to, point you in the right direction, give you a heads up for opportunities, that sort of thing. I'll give you a personal example. When I was in school, I learned about an on-campus job through going through a financial aid office that wasn't part of my wasn't part of my award. It was an additional job. And it was by being the president of a Hispanic Honor Society. I was already in the Hispanic Honor Society. I had no idea the presidency was a paid job. And so when I learned that, I was like, oh, I'm going to run.
No, that's opportunities. The opportunities are there. And I thank you for that story. We would certainly like to thank our guest today, Maria Alejandra Canales, the Managing Director of Program Design at OneGoal, for coming on to our show.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Once again, my name is Kevin Boston Hill, and thank you all for listening to Instruction Discussion, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.